That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Ramey. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. If you're looking for ways to quit drinking, you can go to thatsoberguy.com. Please join our free online men's community, the Victory Circle. You can connect with others all over the United States and the world, actually, living life without alcohol, trying to be better fathers, husbands, entrepreneurs, just be better people overall. Be sure to follow us on X at That Sober Guy Pod, on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast. Shout out to Humans for bringing us in today. I always appreciate those guys. So pumped about our guest today. His name is Randy Blythe, and Randy is the singer of 5-time Grammy-nominated band Lamb of God. You may have done some serious squats and deadlifts in the squat rack with these guys in your headphones if you're anything like me, trying to get pumped up. He's also just about to release, well, as this goes live, it'll just be coming out in a couple of days, his best-selling memoir, Dark Days. He's also a photographer as well. And he's been clean and sober for 14 years, which is pretty awesome. So we're going to talk about all that today. Randy, it's great to have you on the podcast today, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to be here with you. Excited to talk some music, some recovery. And first and foremost, just want to give a little shout out to our friend Trip Lanier, who helped set this interview up. Just such a great dude. And I don't know if Trip knows, well, I've told him before, but he's just had a hand in inspiring me to start Sober Guy, 11, 12 years ago, whatever it is now, and had a hand in helping others get sober and get free from alcohol and drugs. So just a great dude, and check out his podcast, The New Man. And you guys live close by, don't you?
He's not too far. He's down in North Carolina, and where my mom is, and I go down there to surf pretty often, and that's
Nice.
kind of how we met each other.
Oh, that's crazy, man.
I did the New Man podcast a little while ago, and we immediately went out surfing together after. So he's the homie, He's a great dude.
Yeah, he really is. And that's cool, man. That sounds like a great day, some podcasting and then surfing. I imagine surfing's a little different. We spent some time down in Huntington Beach, and so my son and I kind of learned to surf down in that area. What's the difference between surfing Orange County and North Carolina?
It is way less crowded. And, I'm not gonna talk shit and smack talk or anything, but the vibe is not quite so heavily localized. We're a little bit friendlier here,
Nice.
That being said, I get it, because California is their waves are so good consistently almost all the time, and a lot more people surf there. But I remember the first time I went surfing in California, I went to Doheny, with a friend of mine. It's kind of, and it's easy wave, but I'm out paddling the waves. I'm just like, because waves on the East Coast are quick and you have to get into them. A lot of them are steeper, and I'm actually out paddling the waves, and everybody's like, relax, dude. I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. This is so good. I got to get it while it's here. They're like, there's going to be more waves. I'm like, maybe not. So I'm just digging like,
That's funny,
but no, no, it's the waves get really good here during hurricane season. Big barrels, but they're fast. But the vibe is a little less intense. But I've had really good times, really friendly times in SoCal too. Like, it just depends on where you go.
Yeah, totally. My son is 10 now, but he was 7 when we lived down there. So we spent a lot of time at Blackie's in Newport, just because there was that little cove there, and it was a good little soft. Every once in a while, you'd get fired up and get a bunch of people out there, and it was a little gnarly, but good wave to learn on and lots of fun. And man, when you said hurricane season, I just had this quick glimpse. You remember the movie Point Break? Keanu Reeves, and oh man, one of the best movies ever, and just when Bodie at the end, he's like, I'm not coming back. It's just this massive freaking wave, dude. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's insane, bro.
Well, the guy who dropped in on that wave was a stunt man. And I think he had to do it twice. I think that wave was actually in Oregon, as I recall. And I think he did it twice. They're like, we need another shot, because he had to purposely beef. And I think he got paid something like 15 grand per wave because you can die.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
It's a horrible situation, but yeah, I don't know, man. The big wave surfers, they're a different breed. I know a couple of them. They're pretty psychotic. I myself I'm getting up there in age. I just enjoy cruising these days.
Yeah, that's how we are at the skate park too. We got a skate park right down the street, so my son and I go skate a lot. And you see, oh, can you do this? Can you kick? I'm like, I'm just cruising, man. I'm 43 now. I'm not trying to like break my neck or anything.
Yeah,
man.
bro. I'm 53. That I've moved kind of like from skateboarding to surfing. I didn't start surfing until I was 43. Because it hurts. Skateboarding hurts so much more now, and also when I was drinking, I got to be a pretty good skateboarder for a teenager. And then I sort of peaked really early and I am just entirely average, but I enjoyed it. And then in my early 20s, when my drinking really started taking off, my skateboarding fell off, except for every now and then when I would get too drunk and I'm like, I rip. I'm not a compass. And I go out and just bust my ass drunk. And I'm paying the price for that. So my drinking killed my skateboarding pretty much until I got sober. And I got sober when I was 39. And I was like, I need to go skateboarding again because it gave me that's one thing that drinking and drugs do. It takes everything from you, it really does. And so skateboarding for me was so important. In fact, it's how I got into music because the punk rock community was really intertwined with skateboarding in the 80s. It's how I discovered all this underground music. In a sense, that's how I led to what I do today. Yeah. But as drinking took over, skateboarding fell to the wayside, and when I got sober at age 39, I was like, fuck this. I'm going to skateboard. I love this shit. This is important to me. So I started skateboarding again. I went skateboarding on my 40th birthday. It was very important to me. And I was very proud of myself. But I discovered that being a mediocre skateboarder at age 40 hurts a lot worse than being a mediocre skateboarder at 17. When
totally. Yeah.
So it hurt. And then eventually when I was writing my first book, I rented this beach house and I was like, I'm going to learn how to surf. How hard can it be? It's like skateboarding on the water. It's
literally the hardest sport I've ever done. It's the hardest one it's harder than snowboarding, skateboarding. I mean, any of them. So hard.
Yeah, it's super hard because like, unlike skating, like if you're going street skating and you see a curb, you're like, I'm going to slap you that curb. The curb is exactly the same every time you approach it. Yeah. You can dial it in. Okay, I'm going to try it front side this time. Every wave, even at the most consistent spot, is entirely different. So you have to just be in the moment and react. And surfing for me it's a big part of my sobriety. It's part of how I sort of relate to my higher power in a huge way. Because every time when I go surfing, you sober people understand this, you ever feel that connection to whatever it is you reach out to that helps you stay sober. Every time I surf, the first thing I do is I paddle out and I sit and I face the ocean and I use the word God for lack of a better term, the higher power, whatever. I just look at the emptiness and I say, thank you for giving me this part of my life.
Yeah.
And then I say hello to the sharks. I'm like, hello, I'm here. Like I'm in your house. Don't bite me. And then I surf.
That is the strangest feeling though, when you're sitting there and it maybe even strange isn't a good way to put it. It's so, you're so vulnerable. You don't know what is under you. You don't know what's out there. It's scary as shit, but it's also so freeing at the same time. And I think that's why there's some spiritual connection there that we can kind of tap into.
Yeah, bro. And it's really, it's church for me. And it, no matter like what's going on in my life, I can go out and sit on my board and leave it on the shore. Yeah. And I come back on shore and my head is a little bit cleared out, which God knows my head it's like a bad neighborhood and I need adult supervision before I ever go up into it. Surfing helps my head take a shit sometimes.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I like that. Yeah, man. I love the skate, surf and just having fun. Cause when when I work with different dudes, this has come up so many times where, especially in trying to get sober, they've lost something. And I went through this myself. I had lost something, that childlike spirit. And God talks in that, like, we want to be a child again. Like, how do we find that? And I always say, if we go back to something that we did as kids, like I skated growing up, I rode BMX, I played a lot of baseball, those things, in particular skating, I stopped doing once I got in, the worst kind of parts of my addiction, and tapping back into that sober in a different light, it opens up like totally new doors to something that you can connect with and learn how to have fun again without having to be intoxicated or on any type of drugs or alcohol.
That's one of the main things. I think you probably agree with me. I'm not here to evaluate your level of fucked upness, but when I was in my like worst drinking and drugging, and most guys I know who got really fucked up, and they're like, I need to stop. Somewhere inside you you need to stop. Everybody else is telling you don't want to fucking hear that. You're like, fuck you. You drink if you had to go through what me, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere inside you need to stop. But the alcoholism is crazy, and it's tricky because it puts up these weird barriers like, but what will I do without alcohol? What will I do without the drugs? What will I do for fun? And oh yeah, I'll do anything I want, because right now all I'm doing is sitting at the bar stool or going to the dope man's house. That's all I'm doing. Yeah. I'm not actually engaging with life. And if anyone's hearing this and you're worried, like, what will I do without this substance, man? Trust me, it gets better once you put the shit down. You start living again, man.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. You start living. You start realizing who the true self is too. We're covered these layers of escapism. I always like to say, I just wanted to escape because I just didn't like to feel, and I still struggle with that sometimes. Even today, but at least like I have some sort of consciousness now to like recognize a specific way I'm feeling, whether it's pissed off or sad or whatever, whereas before you just kind of numb out. And so I think back to your point, that's so important because it's such a common thing. We're so scared to lay that down. It's like, how am I going to go to a birthday party? How am I going to go to a game? How am I going to go to a concert? How am I going to go to a funeral? Like, how am I going to do any of that stuff without having that crutch to rely on? And that's a really, really scary thing for a lot of dudes.
Right. It sure is. And speaking about going to a concert, I'm a professional musician, and I got sober on tour, right?
That's crazy too.
Yeah. We were, I've told this story before, but this seems like an appropriate place to tell it. We were in Australia and we were on tour with a band called Metallica. We were main support for Metallica. And I had gone out drinking the night before with some friends in Australia. I did some drugs. I think it was Molly. They don't drugs. The good drugs are harder to get in Australia, like prescription drugs. So, but I got some shitty Molly or whatever. I went out drinking all night long and I just couldn't get drunk. I mean, I'm sure legally I was drunk, but it stopped working. It wouldn't work. So I went back to my hotel room and I had a few beers. I was all pissed off. And I woke up the next morning and I looked out at my hotel balcony in Brisbane, Australia, right? Have you been to Australia?
I haven't.
It's fucking awesome, right? So it's an amazing place. So I'm in Brisbane, Australia, and down to the left of my hotel balcony, I see the Brisbane Botanical Gardens. And they've got like just weird plants that we don't have here in America, and weird birds and weird animals, and it's on the river. And right directly in front of my hotel was one of my favorite bookstores in the world, just a rad bookstore. I love bookstores. And then down to the right of the street, there were all these great restaurants. And I looked at all this stuff, and it was an absolutely gorgeous day. And I looked at all this stuff, kind of hungover, and I realized I don't want to exist anymore.
Wow.
It wasn't like I was suicidal. I just wanted to vanish from existence. I did not want to, I just wanted to be gone, dude. And I looked over the night before, the last beers I drank, because I'm still kind of crazy OCD, even when I'm fucking drunk, I had arranged all these beer bottles perfectly in like a triangle, like, bowling pins. I'd arranged them perfectly on this table because I'm trying to control the environment. All the labels are facing exactly the same way. And I'm looking at these empty beer bottles, and I realize that they have become a metaphor for my life. I am just an empty container waiting for someone to pour alcohol and drugs into. And on the outside, everything is very orderly because I'm on tour with fucking Metallica. Who gets to do that? I've got money in the bank account. I'm in Australia, one of the raddest places in the world. My wife hadn't left me yet. I'm in this pretty big band, and I'm looking at all this stuff, and I'm like, yes, everything on the outside is in order, but just like those beer bottles, all it's going to take is just one little push, pling, and those beer bottles are going to fall over and shatter. And that was my life,
Wow.
So I had been fucking around trying to quit drinking for about 4 or 5 years. And I reached this point where on the outside, everything was okay because I just drank my way through my first divorce. I drank my way through waking up in the hospital after fist fights. I drank my way through going to jail for doing dumb shit when I was drunk. I drank my way through getting out of the mental hospital because I was a lunatic and tried to kill myself. I'm like, fuck you. I'm drinking at all these problems. I'm like, I can react and drink. And then this morning, though, when I woke up, I'm like, there's nothing for me to drink against anymore. And I am utterly miserable. So I maybe just maybe things will get better if I quit drinking like everybody's been saying. And so I was just like, I'm not going to drink for the rest of the night. And I went to the show. We were playing with Metallica that night, and some of the guys on their crew and their singer, James Hetfield, were sober, and they had seen me, in my nonsense, because we'd been on tour for about 2 years off and on with them, doing Europe and the States. And they had a few words with me. And I went to them. I'm like, help me. I need some support, please. I can't stop drinking. They're like, you're going to be okay, man. Like, and kind of, and showed me some brotherly love. And then I went out on stage that night in front of 14,000 people, and I was completely falling to pieces. I tell people this, my hair used to be long then, and thank God it was, because I was weeping uncontrollably in between singing. And thank God we're a heavy metal band, because it's just like, and I'm like, see who gives a fuck, screaming my lyrics. And then I'm like, oh my God, my life, what the fuck happened? Where am I? And I'm just falling to pieces in front of 14,000 people. And that was my first day sober. And that was my first show sober. And I spent my whole first month of sobriety on tour, surrounded by free drugs and alcohol. And then I came home, and I think for me, and then once I came home, I was scared to leave Australia, right? I thought Australia was magic because I had tried to quit drinking like elsewhere before. It didn't work. I'm like, I can't leave Australia. But it wasn't Australia, man. It doesn't matter. I had this moment of clarity, and that can occur anytime, anywhere, for anyone. But when I came home, I was like, can I go see concerts anymore when I'm not at work? Can I go see some of these bands who I'm friends with, who I did a lot of partying with? Is this going to ruin music for me? And the first few times I went to shows, I had sober buddies with me. I made sure of that. I did not go by myself. And it was okay. I enjoy music now way more because I actually remember the shows. Like, there's several shows I have zero memory of, both Lamb of God shows and bands I've gone to go see. Like, no memory of attending this. And people have told me, man, that was a great show. Remember when we saw the Jesus Lizard in DC? And I'm like, no, did we?
I was there for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Where was I? So yeah, man, we get this. We get these things back. And for me, man, I'm not saying I'm the best musician or the best writer or the best surfer or skateboarder or best photographer. I do all those things because I'm definitely not, man. I am definitely not. I am an average dude, right? But I got all that shit back. All of it came back to me. Any sort of talent I may have is here. And it was gone when I was drinking. Done. So it's a real blessing to be sober.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. That's a good one, man. Just the hardcore, and then just crying like the back and forth. And like you said, luckily you had long hair, so you probably just looked totally natural from an
I
audience
like just
perspective. But
I was headbanging and screaming and crying like
so
a
funny,
maniac.
man. Yeah, just madness.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to that moment, or maybe even in that first year, like what was the scariest thing for you to I guess face head on in quitting and actually going down that path, taking that next step? And then how did you deal with it, whatever it was?
Well, I think for me, I am not saying in any way, shape, or form that I am special because I'm in a band, right? I am no different than anyone else. I am a fucking drunk. I am a sloppy alcoholic drunk when I drink. But I will say the thing that really kind of worried me was my job, was the environment that I am in, because drugs and drinking are very prevalent, especially in being in a heavy metal band, dude. It's expected that you're going to get fucked up. So I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, and also, I was well on my way into alcoholism before I ever joined a band. I've been sober 14 years now. And I used to be like, I don't know when I switched over into like alcoholic drinking from just having a good time. Cause I had a good time at first, don't get me wrong. But as I start remembering more and more, cause I'm 53 now, like I just was remembering this story from when I was 22 years old that I'm going to tell on this upcoming spoken word book tour I'm going to do. It's like this girl that really liked me, that was she was nice, but she was kind of stalkery, right? Like I was avoiding her, and being nice. Her friends were trying to set me up with her. And then finally one night we wound up at a bar together and we were drinking. And I was 22 years old. She wasn't drinking, actually. I was. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, where am I? And I feel this person beside me. Oh my God, it's her. And man, I had all my clothes on. Luckily, I'm like, I'm still a virgin. Right. I'm like, I wake up, I'm like, I didn't do anything. Thank God. But I'm not in my bed. And I'm like, where are we? She's like, we're in Maryland. And that's the next state over. I'm like, what? What are we doing in Maryland? She's like, we're going to New York City. I'm like, we are? When did we decide this? She's like, last night at the bar, right? And that's at 22 years old, before I'm ever in a band. Most people, when they would drink, my friends, they go out and get fucked up, maybe have a hangover the next day, and then, go on their lives. It's kind of normal when you're young to party, I guess, or at least it was when I was young. Most people don't wake up 2 states over next to a person they've been trying to avoid on the way to New York City.
Yeah, it's not very common.
My drinking was a little bit different from the beginning, but then once you get in a band, it accelerates, because you can get away with shit that you can't get away with in real life. You can, right? I used to just stand on stage and just be like, who's got the fucking drugs? Give me drugs. I want pills. And like magic, pills they would come at the stage right after the show. Someone's be like, here, and hand you like a handful of pills, like people that have like given me cocaine on stage from the audience before, like, here, you want some of this? And I'm like, yes, snorting drugs in front of other people. Man. Like, you can't do that in a regular job. Like, you can't walk into your office job and look around and be like, give me the fucking drugs. Who's got the Oxycontin? Janet, kick down the below. I know you've got it. Give me some, bitch. That's just not, you'd be fired. But you can do that when you're in a band. You can get away with that sort of ludicrous behavior. So I think it's like perpetual adolescence, if you sink into that, that
do you think it helps too to like justify the behavior too? Because like, that's just what you do. This is the whole culture. Like, if you're a musician, you're in the entertainment industry, you're supposed to party. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's, I have a lot of friends in different parts of the entertainment industry, musicians and bands and touring, and it's so interesting to hear their perspective on how they stay sober too. And I think that's kind of where you were going with that. Like, that's something I'm curious about. Like, how do you do that now? Like, how do you stay sober? What are some tips or things that you do to help keep you in line?
Well, for one thing, as far as justifying it using my job, yes, it's very easy to do that when you're in the entertainment business. But if I had been a lawyer or a police officer or an undertaker or a landscaper, I would have found a way to justify it because we're fucking all the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just got lucky. I just got lucky with the heavy metal scene. But for me, how do I stay sober? Number one, I never ever ever forget where I come from, and it's not a horrible thing. Like, I don't wake up every morning like, oh my god, you're an alcoholic, you can't fucking drink, you gotta fight this, because I don't miss it, right? But I wake up every morning and I read some philosophy, and I read some spiritual literature. Everybody can pick their own, and I try and focus myself before I face every day, every single day, you know, without fail. And I put myself in a position where it's like, okay, this, you know, you have to remember who and what you are and what you're trying to do with your life. And I start off my day like that. I also don't look at my cell phone for the first hour that I'm awake, period.
That's good.
Because it's a nightmare machine, you know, especially
it's like heroin, man.
Yeah, it's,
Like,
it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It is the doom scrolling and all that shit. So, but then like on tour and on the road and all that stuff, people, yes, there's a lot of partying, but there's a lot of sober people everywhere. You just have to, and you notice, I think you notice when you're fucked up, man, when you're partying and when you're around everybody, you think everybody is as fucked up as you. It's the norm, or at least with me. You know, I wasn't exactly hanging out with like, you know, triathletes and super healthy people when I was drinking most of the time. I'm hanging around people who get down like I do, which is very fucking hard. So that becomes your sort of normal, I think, when you drink and drug like that. You're like, yeah, it's normal to drink 18 beers a day. It's normal to snort cocaine. It's normal to find heroin in whatever city you're in. And I did all those things, and that became my normal. When you become sober and your eyes open, you realize that not everybody is like that. And people, if you're like me, people will know. They will see the difference in you before you even really feel the difference really in yourself. They're like, something's different with that dude. His eyes are bright. His skin is clearing up. He's walking. He's not moaning and groaning as much. He's in a better mood. And people, you know, will notice that. And people, generally sober people, just kind of appear in my life, man. You find out that more and more and more they're around, dude.
Yeah.
And for me, yeah, man, it's great. So I know tons of sober musicians, sober crew guys. I know sober actors. I know, you know, sober photographers, all in arts and entertainment, because I got sober, they're like, oh, you changed. Let me go talk to you. Everything's okay. Yeah. And also, you know, I'm lucky in the fact that in my band, 4 out of 5 of us are now no longer drink, dude. And I was the Lone Ranger there for a couple of years, and it was kind of hard because I quit, and I'm on this heavy metal bus with these fucking maniacs drinking and doing drugs. And then my guitar player, Willie, quit drinking, and he hasn't had a drink. And I've been sober 14 years. I think he hasn't drank in like 12. And then for the like 8 years, the first 8 years of my sobriety, I'm not talking out of class here because he just published a book, my guitar player, Mark Morton, called Desolation. He got really fucking bad on opiates, heroin, you know. I don't know how I never got strung out because he and I did a fuck ton together, but alcohol, she's my baby, you know. His was opiates. So then for 8 years, I was rolling sober with him, and he was just getting worse and worse and worse. And it was horrible because I knew I'm clean, I'm sober, and I'm like, this dude's going to die. I'm going to find him in his bunk dead. But I never pushed it on him, man, because I didn't like it when people push shit on me. I never pushed it on him. I just tried to keep my side of the street clean and sort of be a good example. If he ever wanted to talk, he came and talked to me and asked me for help from time to time. And then
Did you kind of love him? Like, this is a term I always use, like love them where they're at. Like, I'm going to love you where you're at
Yeah,
right now. I'm not going to
it
try
was,
to change you. And
yes, and it was very hard because
it's
it's
so hard.
very, very fucking hard
Yeah.
because, and like I said, I'm not talking out of class because he's public about this, just wrote a book about this, but it was very hard because I was looking at him and he's a smart guy. And I'm like, don't you know you're fucking killing yourself? Why are you doing this, you fucking idiot? This is horrible. And I'm looking at him thinking all that. And that's what people were saying about me. For 22 years. So I had to remember that. I'm like, just because you've been sober for 3 years doesn't make you the fucking king of sobriety, you dumbass. You fucking been arrested. And so I had to kind of just be there, man. And he would talk to me and, I don't want to die. And I'm like, I know, bro, this is what you got to do. And then he'd go back out. And then finally, it worked. And he's been clean and sober 6 years now. And then our drummer, Art, he joined the band. He was still partying, he's been sober over 2 years now. So you got 4 out of the 5 dudes in the band that are don't do shit. And it's nice,
sure.
It's fucking great. But for a while it was me. It was a Lone Ranger. Somebody's got to put their foot into the pool first.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I was the worst.
For a dude out there listening right now, because this is a great little piece right here. I think, we have friends, right? Whether you're in a band or whether it's friends from childhood or friends from, wherever. And sometimes, number one, you have to kind of figure out who's friends and who acquaintances or drinking buddies are, right? I mean, that's kind of one thing. But like, how would you deal or what advice or thoughts would you share to someone out there listening, going like, maybe that's one of their big things. Well, how am I going to tell so-and-so? How am I going to, find friends? How am I going to hang out? Sometimes we have to take a step back from that for a minute and maybe even distance ourselves from certain people and even family sometimes, which can be really, really hard. But it's like, how important is it for me to get sober? Like, am I willing to go to any lengths to do it? I think that's maybe a good way to put it.
Yes, that's a very good way to put it. And I feel very lucky in that I'm the only alcoholic in my family. I got my parents are still here. I got 3 younger brothers. I got a nephew. Nobody but me, as far as I know, in my family has had a problem. So it's something I didn't have to deal with. However, I have many friends who are sober who had to deal and still continue to deal with family members who are drug addicts or drunks, or it's just part of the culture of the family. Yeah. I think you have to, as you said, are you willing to go to any lengths? For me, when I quit drinking, it was because I was going to die, dude. And I was going to die. I would never make it to cirrhosis of the liver. I would go out and get in a fight with like a Navy SEAL and get killed, or I'd think I was Spider-Man and jump off a building, because I was a fucking maniac when I drank. I'd never make it to the health failure thing, but I was going to die. And I realized that. So I had to ask myself, okay, like, do you want to live? And what are you willing to do? And that was pretty much anything. And as far as finding out which are friends and which are drinking acquaintances, in my experience, that sort of sorts itself out pretty quickly, because the buddies at the bar who you think are like so important to you, once you stop drinking, once you step outside of that, they're just going to kind of fall off. They really do. I mean, not that I don't have friends who still don't drink. I do, but it's like most of these people who you sit there and drink or do drugs with, once that's gone, what's the basis of your relationship? So you don't really have to worry about that. As far as family members, I wish I could give some sort of workaround for that. But yeah, if you have to step away from that for a while, you can either sit there and continue doing what you're doing and fucking die, or you can get some distance and take care of yourself first, because you aren't going to be able to, if you want to help them, if you're like, oh, they have a problem, you aren't going to be able to help them if you're fucked up. It's like the whole thing on the airplane when the oxygen mask drop. Put yours on first, before helping anyone else, because you can't do shit if you can't breathe. It's really, for me, I'm an impatient person at times, and I think early sobriety, you really have to learn how to be patient with yourself and work through these things, because as my friends told me, and when, like, in the first month of sobriety, I'm on tour, these dudes in Metallica's crew and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, I want everything to be fixed right now. Like, this is weird. I'm uncomfortable. They're like, how long did you drink and do drugs? And I'm like, 22 years. And they're like, do you think you're going to get fixed overnight? You think everything's going to be perfect overnight? No. And, it wasn't, but I'll tell you what, it was a lot better than not wanting to exist.
Yeah. How important was that for you to have those guys surrounding you in the beginning? Because the addiction, alcoholism, it's so isolating. And so a lot of us think like we're going through it ourselves. I'm the only one going through this stuff. And when we find that there's actually other people, like you talked about earlier, there's a big sober community out there. And when you kind of lock into that and you have some support, man, I know for me, it was huge. Like how about for you? And that, was it crucial? Like
indispensable, because I tried to quit drinking on my own, without any sort of support, without leaning on anyone else, because I'm a fucking man, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I got this. I can do it.
I got this. I don't need you. Fuck you. Like, I can do this.
Totally. Don't be a bitch. Like, I got
Don't be a bitch, No, fuck that. I failed miserably every time. I remember one time I was sober for about a month. I'd made it about a month without drinking. However, I was still doing other little things, so eating pills, in order to, I was like, at least I'm not drinking, right? I'm eating like 40 milligrams of oxycodone at a time, but I'm not drinking, at least, right? So I was quote unquote sober for about a month, and I went to France to record with this band Gojira. And I was with them, and I couldn't get my pills over there. And I was totally sober for like 3 or 4 days when I was them. And I was like, okay, I'm handling this. And I'm like, I'm going to Paris for a couple of days because I want to write lyrics in Paris before I go home. I went to Paris. I went to a cafe because it's where Hemingway hung out or whatever. I was there for about a minute and a half before I had bought a huge fucking beer. And the next 2 days I was in Paris, I was just completely shit-faced by myself, wandering around France. I can't believe I made it home because
probably didn't write anything either.
Nothing. I still have the notebook. It's like, I think I wrote failure on a page. You could barely read it, like, my big lyrical hit, failure. But that's because I was there by myself, and I refused to lean on anyone for support. And, you can be a tough guy all you fucking want. You can be a tough guy right into the grave. Or you can say, hey, man, I'm scared. I'm fucked up. I don't know what to do. And you can find some sober people, and you can look at them and you can say, bro, help me. And, I do my best to do that for other people when they come to me and ask for help. Like, people send people to me for advice, for help getting sober. And I'm like, it's crazy to me, right? I'm like, holy shit. Nobody used to trust me. Like, you couldn't leave anything around me. I'd steal your shit, sell it, buy drugs or whatever, fuck you. And then now people are like, oh, go ask Randy. He kind of knows. He's got some experience with this. It's wild, man. I'm just grateful for it.
Yeah.
But man, get some help. Don't be a tough guy, because that's bullshit.
It's pretty.
Some people can do it. Yeah. Some people can.
I haven't really met anybody yet myself, and I've met a lot of people between the podcast and recovery, and just even friggin' in the grocery store, and
sure.
That always comes back to, well, somebody or some group or something helped me. It's never been like I've never talked to anybody who's been like, yeah, I got sober. I did it all on my own and I'm doing fantastic. Best life.
Yeah.
Like I've never heard anybody say that. And I've also never heard anybody say, I say this often, my habitual drinking habits have really improved my life. Like I've never heard anybody say that, like ever.
Dude.
And it's just like, why do we continue with it? You know,
drinking a case of beer a day is fucking awesome, man. It does so
it feels
much
so
good for you. Yeah, you look great. You feel great. Everybody loves you. You smell great. Fuck out of here, man. You know.
Any thoughts, and you know, feel free to dive in or say whatever on this kind of topic here, but kind of the targeted subversion, I think, of men through alcohol, advertising, media.
Oh yeah.
You know, even sports and music to some extent, like just it's thrown on us so much. It's so normalized. And I really do believe that there is a targeted effort to dumb men down and make us not leaders of our families, make us not leaders in our communities and being good people, because we talked about earlier, you can't find your true self when you're addicted to drugs and you are addicted to alcohol. You're completely disconnected from reality. So any thoughts on that? Like what, you know, your take on that?
I definitely think, you know, alcohol ads are definitely targeted towards a masculine audience. Not that, I mean, I know female sober people, female drug addicts, female sober alcoholics who got it in, they drank. But I think the cultural sort of leverage towards a financial return for these fucking alcohol companies, it's tilted towards men. It just is, because it's how we, and I think it works. One reason why it works, besides the cool image of like the most interesting man in the world from Dos Equis or whatever. Like, really? A beer guy is the most interesting guy in the world? Not that I've met. I think it works more towards men because we are historically taught not to really show feelings, you know, and alcohol, but everybody has them, right? And alcohol and drugs help bury those feelings. So, I think, I don't know, to my viewpoint, I think it's probably just a matter of financial return. Cash rules everything around me, cream, you know, and you know, people of these super rich people, heads of these corporations, you know, whatever they may be, they don't give a fuck about you. They just want your money. So, you know, you gotta ask yourself, bottom line, let's make that fucking money. And I'm not allergic to making money myself, but I will tell you this, my band will not accept sponsorship from alcohol companies or tobacco or anything like that, you know, and that's a common thing in the music industry. We've done like some tours back in the day when we were partying, but no more. I can't do that. And also, but I'm not preachy at people either. Like, you can't drink, because some people are not alcoholics. Let's face it. They can have a beer or two.
Totally.
You know? So good for you. Me, I wake up in different states covered in blood, you know, so I can't do it.
Wondering how you got there and where you're going.
Well,
I know.
Exactly.
It is interesting. Like, you know, there's a lot of people, and I think that's why there's that kind of line walk when we have those kind of, you know, conversations around some of that stuff, because there are a lot of people who either just choose not to drink, or they'll have a glass of wine once a month or a beer once, you know, every so often. And, you know, that's kind of, you know, what it's there for, I guess, in a sense. But unfortunately, there's many of us like you and I who can't do that, or who don't think about, I don't know if you've had this thought before. I've been sober since 2013. And there are days now where I go, okay, I got sober when I was 32. I was still a total jackass. I'm still a jackass sometimes, but I've gotten a lot better at it. But there are times, always, you know, but like that trickery in your mind that goes, well, man, I'm a totally different man than I am. You know, I wasn't even a man at 32. I was still just this boy stuck in this like freaking man's body.
Right.
but I'm probably a little better off. I wonder if I could have a beer and be okay, and do that. I've pondered that before. I don't want to do it, but I think it's a normal thought. You have that ever?
It is a normal thought. I think that for me, as an intellectual exercise, because I know people think these things, right? You're telling me this. I know that this exists. So as an intellectual exercise, I'm like, I wonder, I've been sober 14 years. I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was like, would it be any different if I took a drink? And then I'm like, nope, no, it wouldn't, because I have like a massive pile of evidence, 22 fucking years of just a horror show. And you know what? Maybe it will be okay, because I don't know. But let's say I'm kind of a statistical, analytical kind of guy. Let's look at all the times before and and let's compare what it never worked. So why, despite all the evidence to the contrary, I'd still drink and drink and drink, and something horrible would happen, and then I'd go back to it. So I'm just not willing to risk it, man. And the fact of the matter is that I do not miss it. And that's the other thing I think it's important for people to know if you're just starting. Yes, sometimes it's real rough at the beginning. Particularly, you hear the first year of sobriety is a roller coaster, and you're raw, and your emotions are raw, and you don't really know what's going on. You just have to focus on getting through the end of each day, and eventually it's gonna level out, man. Because I'll tell you, I don't miss it. I think in the last 14 years, I've had a serious urge to drink twice, to where I had to call my friends and tell on myself. I was like, I just had suddenly, because I'm an alcoholic. That's what happens. I was thinking about drinking, and they're like, "Do you feel like drinking anymore?" I'm like, "No. But I better let you know, because it's, for me, it's a matter of being rigorously honest,
I love it.
and as soon, once again, the support sort of thing. Once I tell on myself, once I tell someone like, yo, this was kind of this wild thought I had at the traffic light, which is where it happened about 4 years ago. I'm listening to fucking Black Flag Damage, and all of a sudden I'm like, I want a beer,
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
Out of nowhere, it was a sunny day. Everything was cool. I'm listening to one of my favorite bands, and like, fucking Heineken, right? I picked up the phone. I called my buddy Matt. I'm like, bro, I'm having a thought. He's like, did you drink? I'm like, no. And he's like, how are you feeling now? I'm like, okay. And it's,
just to get it out,
Yeah, but you got to get it out, man.
Yeah. You got to get it out. That's one of the hardest things for dudes to do, is to pick up the phone. And when I say dudes to do, I'm talking about myself too. Like we talked about earlier, like, I got this, I'm fine. I tend to minimize stuff. It's not that big of a deal. I don't want to put my shit on someone else today. Like, I'm fine. I'm good. But you have to reach out when things are not good. You have to, it's not even so much that you're going to get this immediate great, answer and solution. It's just getting it out at the moment. And a lot of the time that will pass, like everything, that urge will pass after a few minutes.
This too shall pass. This too shall pass. Stuff. You got to ride it out, man. You got to hang in there.
Let's no, I was just gonna say we just got a couple minutes left, but I want to get to your book, man. What made you write the book? Like, give us a little synopsis and tell us if you're going on tour or anything, what that looks like.
Yeah, the book is called Just Beyond the Light. It comes out February 18th, and there's the intro starts off. It's about perspective, right? It's about striving for a balanced perspective, even in this crazy life. And the intro starts off like most everything in my life. I start talking about how screwed up my perspective was when I was drinking, and it goes through, it's basically a collection of essays. There's stuff on fear, which is a pretty common thing with alcoholics, and how I view fear. There's a whole chapter about how I view things through the world through two lenses. One is the lens of a sober person. That's first and foremost, and second, it's through the eyes of an artist. And the two are hand in hand. They are inextricable for me, because without sobriety, I'll have no art, and the basic theme of the book is about trying to find a balanced perspective. And to do that, for me, much like getting sober, I try to figure everything out myself. I always fail. So I need to ask people with more experience, or older or more knowledgeable, for advice. And like there's a chapter about my grandma. She was raised during the Depression and stuff. I learned from her. She was hard, she lived to be 100 years old. She was hard as a rock, but I learned a lot of stuff from her, a different perspective. And there's a chapter about a terminal fan I befriended during the last few months of his life. He died when he was 33 of leukemia. And I learned a lot about how he handled his own mortality, fear, and stuff like that from him. Very inspiring. So it's, like I said, the book is about trying to find a balanced perspective in this fucked up world. And there's no answers in my book. It's not a fucking self-help book. It's not like this is a 3-step method for getting yourself together. It's more like an exploration of the questions I have to ask myself on a daily basis. And I hope the reader will take a look at it and ask some questions of themselves about how they can improve their own life.
Love it, man. Love it. Thanks for sharing that. And where can folks find it? I know it's about to come out here. Just in the next couple days as this goes live.
Yeah, it's coming out on February 18th. You can order it on Amazon. You can order it. It's coming out on Hachette Books. So there's a bunch of pre-order links. You can order it from Barnes and Nobles. Awesome. You can go to your local independent owned bookstore and keep money in your economy and order it from them. They'll order it for you. It's on a big publisher. And I'm getting ready to go out on a spoken word tour to support it. I'm going to go out and tell a bunch of crazy stories. Of course, many of them are going to involve drinking and drugging from my life.
You coming to Boise? Are you coming to Boise?
Not Boise on this one. Not this
East
one.
Coast, West Coast.
East Coast, West Coast, some Midwest. Nice. But you can see. You can get tickets to that at www.randyblythe, that's spelled BLYTHE.com, randyblythe.com, if that's how you want it.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and we'll put those links in the show notes so they're easy for those out there listening to find Randy. It's been great to have you on the podcast, man. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for coming on and sharing, man. Yeah,
man. We'll have to do it again and catch up on some sobriety stuff.
I'd love it, man. It's great to connect with you. Thanks again.
You, sir. Thank you.
Share the podcast with a friend. Join the Victory Circle, our free Sober Guy men's community. You can go to thatsoberguy.com for that and more resources. Thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate you guys. Keep your blood clean.